All right, guys, welcome back to part two. Thank you guys for listening to part one. I'm here for part two with the Backseat Scout. Once again, we've got three more quarterbacks to go through here. I think that the conversations on the first few quarterbacks are as good as I've heard anywhere. Really great prep from Backseat Scout and all of his, time. Like you could see the time and the familiarity that he has with these quarterbacks. So really happy that we have him back here for part two. Still on the same night and recording, but happy that he was willing to give us so much of his time. So thanks, Backseat. Really, really great work on part one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always love talking about the quarterbacks. So yeah, no, happy that we get to have a part two with this.
All right, well, diving right into that part two, we're going to go with Jalen Milroe, a quarterback who I actually have as the number two quarterback on my board, slightly ahead of Shedeur. I kind of fell in love with Milroe's ability to potentially control down and distance. Definitely one of the bigger, more physical specimen style quarterbacks. He's very just a big dude. Like when you watch him, he's got the strong arm, he's got just a big body. Like he's definitely kind of the Jalen Hurts style quarterback. I think a lot of people are going to make that comp for him. So that's a pretty easy comp. Like he's not like Jamarcus Russell big or Cam Newton. I guess in some ways maybe a little Newton like in terms of his physicality, but like in terms of just his general size, like he kind of fits that archetype. And I'll tell you like this about Milroe. I just see how he fits into this league, in the modern day league, which is kind of a mixture of old school like sometimes even 1970s football, where teams are just trying to make like 4 or 5 yards really, really consistently, and then use those 4 or 5 yards to create explosive plays here and there. I just find that we're in a really refreshing period for NFL offenses where it's not all just downfield passing and it's not all running and it's not all just short. It's not, anti-option, anti-athletic quarterback. We kind of have a really great blend of offense going in this current era. And I think Jalen Milroe just fits that to a T. And what I love about him, I think, is his potential to control down of distance. He is the best runner at the quarterback position I think I've seen in terms of, do I get confused if that's a running back running or a quarterback? I'm telling you, if you took every quarterback in the draft for the past 7-8 years, and you took every running back in the draft, you'd be able to get 95% accuracy. If I showed you a random clip and said, is that a quarterback or is that a running back? You would get them right maybe 98% of the time. The person that you would get wrong is Jalen Milroe. This guy is a real ball carrier. And it's something that I hadn't seen at the quarterback position in a while, where you have that real volume skill, someone who can run it 12, 13, 14, 15 times as a design of an offense. And I think it could work in terms of just running off tackle. Like just it was kind of jarring. I'll be honest, it was kind of jarring to watch him run the first time. Like I had seen like his tape and his highlights. So I was like, whoa. This dude is not it. We've seen quicker QBs. We've seen more elusive quarterbacks, but I don't know if we've seen a true ball carrier at the quarterback position who also plays that role well, like Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing too, is like, I mean, you have a great frame at like 6'2", 225 pounds, I believe. Um, and like just incredible speed. I think, like you said, there's some quarterbacks that can scramble, can pick up a few yards, but he can fly and also runs with good vision. That like you said, in terms of like what separates him from like other running quarterbacks, that's just stands out right away. Just being able to pick up yards. I think, I think we talked about in part one, at least with you being a Malik Willis fan, and I feel like at least for Milroe, that was my comp for him as Malik Willis. So I'm starting to see where that's coming into play, at least with liking him, at least a lot of those similarities. I think the thing that really speaks to this quarterback class too is, at least for my grading and rankings, like I usually will have potential be a little bit lower viewed, at least when factors into my grading, because it looks more closely at like how they are as a player right now. So that made Milroe my number 10 quarterback. And yet still, when I hear that you have him as number 2, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I totally understand. That's just like really shows what this class is like this year. And at least with Milroe, I think like the big thing with him is like, I have his charting numbers up on here. I mean, obviously there's a lot of red. I think the thing that really separates him from where he could be in like those top quarterbacks for me is that deep ball accuracy. Because like you said, he can do a lot of the short accuracy like we saw there. He actually has really great footwork on his short throw accuracy, which I think doesn't get talked about enough. The way he can quickly plant his feet, get him aligned with his target. Like it's really like I think a lot of people look at Milrow and just say, oh, he can't play quarterback, but like he has some good fundamentals for his short passing concepts. It's just the stuff past that is where it gets a little bit rough. And just with those deep ball numbers just getting really rough, especially in that second half of the year, that's what really made him drop, at least for me personally. Because last year, it was really easy to buy into him because you had that elite rushing ability. You had him throwing bombs every single game. You had him still completing those short passes. Like it was really easy to see, like almost like, I know the comp gets thrown out all the time, but a Josh Allen starter kit. Now with the deep ball actually kind of falling apart, that's kind of where I think he lost a lot of fans. But the fact that he still could complete that shows the ability is there. So I think it's just really going to be interesting to see how an NFL team pairs them with a coaching staff and a receiving core to be able to hopefully get back to that ability.
So that's, I think, a big part of it. Like when I saw some of his deep balls that he completed, they looked really, really good. I know that it always looks good, but I was like, okay, this is a real vertical thrower. This is a guy who could throw a really deep post over everyone's head. He can throw an accurate deep ball. I know that they had some offensive issues. I had some big criticisms about Alabama's offense this year that they were running with him. I felt that they didn't lean necessarily into his strengths a lot. I thought that they didn't try to control down and distance well to set him up for more of those, better opportunities to throw deep. I think the arm is definitely there. I have a very interesting comp for Milrow in terms of his throwing style and processing style. He really reminds me of rookie Lamar Jackson. And not in terms of the run for 5,000 yards, but the way that he processes the short part of the field. He really commits to his plays. He really commits to the playbook, which I like. He can execute. I think he also a guy that can execute 20, 30 plays in a row. Someone who could he just goes through plays, I feel like, in a way that he follows the playbook so well that sometimes he almost overcommits to it. I saw him take some like very low reward, high risk passes because that's where the play was supposed to go and design wise. And I was like, okay, I see what I'm dealing with here. I'm looking at rookie Lamar Jackson. He has the same struggles. He turns a lot of crossing routes into stop routes. He loves hitting his tight ends. He loves throwing it short. He loves throwing like into certain like his throwing style just really reminds me of some of those early Jackson years. And I'm like, okay, I know what I'm looking at. Now, where do I think it can go? And the thing about Milrow that gets me excited is I think his vertical passing game, like you said before, it's more developed than what Lamar had, just because Lamar throws more of like a little bit more of a flexible throwing style. Milrow's a little bit more traditional. So even though they see the field in a similar way, like the way they view it is the same, the way they throw it is very, very different. Lamar more of a little bit more sidearm, a little bit more creative. Milrow a little bit more just like really textbook, a lot of power. Just, Matt Waldman compared his throwing motion to Dan Marino. And he actually brought up the point that you brought up about his ability to kind of throw short and manipulate defenders. He really runs the plays. I think that once again, just like with Shedeur, what I think somebody's going to like about Milrow is that this is a guy that can run the plays and is not going to embarrass me, but he also has all this extra rushing upside and option upside. Like, I don't think you're converting Milrow to a different offense. Like, I think that with Dart, there's a specific kind of, you could kind of go a few different ways with him. With Ward, you kind of have more openings of flexibility. Milrow, you're running the sort of either like an Eagles version of the offense or you're running like a Baltimore version of the offense. You're going to be running something that's going to rely on the mobility and strength of your quarterback. And I think that he has the ability in the right place to be just to be so consistent in terms of keeping his team in front of the sticks. First down after first down, 2nd and 3. I see him also as a very good 4th down quarterback. So all of a sudden, 3rd and 8, you don't have to pick up that whole first down. Kind of like what the Eagles do with Jalen Hurts, where they're like, 3rd and 12, we're going to throw it in front of the sticks, hopefully get some yak, and now we're staring at 4th and 2. No problem. 4th and 1, no problem. This is a guy that kind of allows you to control the game in that way, and I think he's going to do two things. One, that's going to keep him out of bad situations. So I think the coach at Alabama, I didn't like the way he called the offense. I thought that they played way too far out of his strengths from time to time. Like, I'm just like, first down, why are we in shotgun dropping? Why are we like looking to throw like he's Peyton Manning? Like, that's not who this guy is. Just get a running back, do some option, have him run for 5 yards, have him run for 4 yards, and then eventually the defense will have to overcommit. or he'll be able to hit some plays in the flats, kind of similar to the way Lamar was playing earlier in his career. Like, to me, I look at Milroe and I just see already what I'm looking at. And that ground game, the foundation is there. I just think he's going to be able to do two things. One, keep down and distance measurable. And two, because he's going to be able to keep down and distance measurable, there will be 3rd and 1 opportunities, 4th and 1 opportunities. Like, Jalen Hurts is actually kind of starting to become a little bit famous for throwing it deep on 4th and 1, hitting A.J. Brown in a couple of games already on deep bomb touchdowns or deep bomb 40-yard passes on these sort of 3rd and 1s, kind of raising the ceiling of that offense. And I see a lot of similarities between Milroe and Hurts. I think that comparison's getting thrown out a lot, but I do think that Hurts has I believed in Hurts from the start. It's funny because when we looked at Hurts, I was watching CeeDee Lamb tape, and I'm like, this quarterback looks pretty good. I thought the Patriots were actually going to take him, and he ended up falling to the Eagles. But I actually had Hurts pretty high up. You said about Malik Willis, about how, oh, Malik, I see your kind of guy. I don't think that Malik and Milroe are similar in that I think Malik actually has a lot more down the field. Like at Liberty, he was throwing some crazy throws down the field on improv runs. I don't think Milroe is going to be like sort of the improvisational vertical thrower. And I know we haven't necessarily seen it from Malik yet at the pro level. I get it. But to me, Malik kind of was more of a freestyle quarterback who I just happened to like the size, speed, arm strength, and accuracy for. Milroe is a little bit more like Hurts. I kind of want him playing within the scheme, being conservative, and taking more calculated deep shots. So I know that Malik hasn't necessarily done that in the pros just yet. I'm just saying what I liked from Malik at Liberty was kind of the more freestyle thing, and that's why I felt Tennessee was such a disaster for him in Vrabel's system. But I think Milroe really looks like another Jalen Hurts with a little bit more rushing upside. I don't know if he's going to have the character that Hurts displays in terms of his consistency and that type of stuff. I think he does, though. Like when I watch his tape, I'm like, I know what I have, and I think I could build a pretty good offense around it. So I think that most people that see Milroe as the second best quarterback in the class are going to say something along these lines, and that like he just translates to the modern game and what teams are looking at from a new offensive perspective. So that's kind of my opinion on Milroe. I really do think he's the second best quarterback in this class.
Yeah, and at least with the part with Jalen Hurts, I will say, like, for full transparency, I wasn't a big fan of Jalen Hurts when he was coming out of the draft, but he's also a great example where a player can progress when he goes to the right team, when he has the right system around him, when they actually have a developmental plan instead of just trying to throw him in and it's just not a great fit. Where now we see a quarterback with his footwork's still not great, but it's so much better than it was at Oklahoma. His pocket presence is so much better, and he just has a much stronger feel of how to run an offense. So that's where it can be worth betting on that upside when, again, you're not rushing to go take a player like early in the draft and like force him out there way too early before he's ready to play. And I think too, at least like you said, with kind of to your point with the Washington coach coming to Alabama, it's kind of like we talked about in part one, where it's like you have these coaches that just want to run their system and don't think, okay, how does this work with my personnel? And it just, like you said, I think that was a big part of what Milroe's struggles were. And I think also just a lot of the struggles he had, I think just were also trying to get used to that new offense and some of the learning curves he had with it. And I think at the halfway point of the season, they just kind of realized like, oh shoot, we are in trouble. Like, and there's disconnect between the quarterback play, receiver play, coaching, just like, it was just a hot mess, like you said. I do think at least with, you mentioned about him getting a little bit too dedicated on going to the play. And I did see that a lot. I think the Oklahoma game was like the best example of Jalen Milroe doing that, where there were just so many throws where like the guy was blanketed and he would just still try to throw it in there. So I think that'll be the biggest thing, is making sure he's comfortable with the play call in the NFL, but also getting him in actual situations that leverage his strengths and don't just leave him out there to dry.
Yeah, I have like that's very much prevalent in my notes. It's why I compared him to the early Lamar years, where like he would do the same things, and it's just a lot of like simple stuff, like better on horizontal or tight end reads than on sideline throws. Like he's not really an outside thrower in terms of like the way he likes to play. He likes to play middle out as opposed to outside in. Like you're going to go to Kyle McCord later on, and Kyle McCord is an outside in quarterback, 100% to me. And I look at Milroe and I'm like, this is a middle out this is a middle out quarterback. He wants to look to the middle. For Silicon Valley fans, if you know about middle out, that's actually pretty funny. But he's a middle out thrower. He's going to throw seams. He wants to throw crosses, curls, and that's what he's going to be strong at. Just playing the running game in the middle of the field and like the intermediate seams and things like that. Like I just like his overall physicality. I think he's a strong guy. I think he's got the right build. I just think that certain things about him, he's a pro level athlete, an exceptional ball carrier. And I think that running is going to be kind of his leadership. I think the teams are going to be galvanized by his ability to run for the extra yard, push the pile. I think that that's going to earn him a lot of respect. I think that's also something I've been touching on a lot with these quarterbacks. I'm starting to realize that, like, how can these guys earn the respect of the locker room? I just think that Milroe is going to do that really, really quick with his gutsiness. And it's funny, like when I compare him to the other QBs in this class, I think that the quarterbacks that appeal to good teams are Shedeur Sanders and Jalen Milroe. I think Cam Ward appeals to just about everybody. There's probably a few people who don't love his size, like his height and things like that. But I think Cam Ward kind of would appeal to good teams and bad teams alike. But I think that the smarter teams are going to value what Shedeur and what Milroe bring to the table. I think that they're going to start to see where the nuance in their games has, higher positive value than others.
Yeah, no, and I think also just which quarterbacks can actually elevate an offense. Like we have quarterbacks that can run maybe an offense efficiently, but like just how many quarterbacks have the arm that Milroe has? How many quarterbacks have the rushing that he has? Like if you're picking a quarterback that just has all the tools of a quarterback that is one of the best in the NFL, like Milroe at least has that. So I think if you have a coach that is confident and knows how to play to his strengths, like I think he's a great developmental option. I think, again, just you got to have a plan, kind of like the Ravens had with Lamar, the Eagles had with Hurts. It's just like, and that goes with a lot of these quarterbacks in this class, since we don't have a lot of like tier one, day one starters like last year. It's just the development plan is just so important this year for all of them, but especially for Milroe, just to actually reach that high ceiling of his.
Yeah, I think that it's just, we talk about the ceiling. I'm not sure exactly where the ceiling is. I just think that his floor to me, or his medium level, I value his ability to pick up first downs and move the chains in that way. I just think he's going to help your run game instantly. He's got the big arm. He has a big arm to the outside. I don't think I want him making like a million outside reads right now. I want him kind of staying in that early Lamar zone. But the difference, I think, between him and early Lamar is that he really has that vertical down the sidelines. He's just better at it than Lamar was at that point. It's just because of the way he's built and the way he throws. I just like his pop time. It also gets the ball out fast. I see the makings of a really, really good quarterback on a down by down level. Like Jackson Dart, down by down, how do I feel? I feel pretty good, but not great. I don't feel great. I feel okay. With Shedeur, I feel like I have options. He could do a bunch of things, but is he going to help my run game? I don't know. If he doesn't have the right skill players around him, I'm not so sure how great that's going to be. I felt like Hunter helped him out a bunch also. So Shedeur, I'm like, I have the reasons why I really like him, and I have reasons why I don't like him. I'm pretty divided on Shedeur. I still think he's the most divisive candidate in all of the players. I think there's going to be some people are high on Dart, but Shedeur is going to be the big divide. And I look at Milroe and I see it. First down. Option. What are we doing? Is it going to be an option run? Is he going to run? Is he going to keep it? Oh, I don't know. Is he going to hit the tight end over the middle? It's like very, very simple. I see how the offense works, and I see the consistent advantage generation. I think that's the real term here I'm looking for. Every play, just like I say with Jalen Hurts, every play he poses a number of problems. Like I had a big debate with somebody of Jalen Hurts versus Justin Herbert. And I think there's some claim that Herbert, you can have the opinion that Herbert's a better thrower and quarterback. Like I understand the people that fall in love with Herbert's ability. I totally get it. And I'm not saying that at some point with a better supporting cast, maybe Herbert does at some point get near Hurts or eclipse Hurts. I'm open to that possibility. But I don't know that Herbert on a down by down level, like from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 5 to 3rd and 7, is he as dangerous as Jalen Hurts? I just don't think he's down by down as consistent and as big of a problem. I see Milroe as a 3-down or a 4-down problem on every drive. And I would not want to try to build a defense to stop him. Like With Herbert, I feel like, okay, if I could control the run and stay out of 2nd and 2, I'm probably going to be able to keep my upside a little bit capped. I can be able to slow them down. With Milroe, I'm like, oh God, I'm in second and 4 again. Oh no, it's 3rd and a foot, but they could go for it on 4th down. So I don't know what the heck they're going to do on 3rd and 1. I just find that Milroe on a down by down level translates better than Shedeur and translates better than Dart. I'm not sure if it translates better to Cam Ward because Ward's just such a master in the short passing game that I think that he's a little bit tougher in some ways to handle than Milroe. But like I would even accept if somebody said that they thought Milroe was the best in the class. I think that's weird. I know that that's a weird opinion. But if somebody went up to me and said, I actually think Milroe might end up being the number 1 quarterback, I would say I get it. A little bit more than if somebody said Jackson Dart or Shedeur. I mean, maybe not Shedeur, but like for sure Dart. And I think even Shedeur, I think like I would say like, do I think he's going to be better than Milroe and Ward? He could be, but I probably bet the other two. Milroe versus Shedeur to me is a very fun debate. I think that there's going to be people on both sides, but I have Milroe as my number 2, and I'm pretty strong on that position.
Yeah, and I think to play devil's advocate, I think, like you said, there's a lot of high floor you can add as a runner, but I think we also see, at least this year recently with the whole Anthony Richardson experiment, how much it can also backfire when we don't quite have as much development as we expected in the quarterback. So I think it's a tricky situation and I think they rushed things with Anthony Richardson a little bit. So I think if they gave him more time to sit, I think could have been there's still time for him to come back and be really good next year or in the future. But I think I think Miller will just require patience at least than not rush him out there.
I think that might be the way to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if he was also like more of the day 1 starter type. Like I have Dart firmly as like a week 13, week 10 starter. I think Milroe could be your opening day starter, and you're just going to have to go through some of the growing pains, same way we did in Baltimore. You're going to have to go through some of the growing pains with it, but I do see him as potential. I could see you having enough to work with to install just because of the run game. You could kind of install him week 1. I'm not saying I would do it, but I could understand it. It's funny you bring up Anthony Richardson because me and Matt Wallman share this opinion on Milroe. We both like a lot of the same things, and he actually brought up Richardson on his quarterback show, and where he discussed Milroe as well. And on Richardson, he was like, "Well, Richardson had a lot of drops this year. He was pretty good actually. If you look at some other metrics and things like that, he was pretty high on Richardson, and I still like Richardson." So we'll see kind of where that goes in terms of like the long fuse in these quarterbacks. It's just interesting that you brought up Richardson because there's actually conflicting opinions on his performance even last year.
Yeah, no, and I think at least it is. I think for Richardson it is more of a nuanced thing. It wasn't like a black and white, like, oh yeah, he was terrible, or it was like, oh, like the team was kind of collapsing around him. Like I feel like there's so much like play to play, game to game, and that happens when you have a quarterback with as little starting experience as he had in college, and just with the team around him kind of being in a bit of a flux right now, just with injuries and other personnel changes. So, hopefully Miller goes to a little bit more stable situation. So he's another one kind of like Dart, where I'm just very interested to see what the NFL thinks of him because I feel like he's in a free fall because everyone saw the hand size and was like, oh, he's not a draftable quarterback. And then we find out either he did the OJ Simpson treatment and got bigger hands, or they just had poor measurements at the Senior Bowl. Now he has 9-inch hands. So I feel like a lot of people are out, but like you said, I can see a world where the NFL does view him higher, or at the very least, like I can see other people having high views of him and working out in the NFL.
All right. So kind of where do you see him going? I have 2 specific teams in mind, but I'm curious where you think he could end up.
Yeah, for me, to be honest, I view him more as like an early day 3 guy, maybe a late day 2 just with the upside, but at least for like looking more down the road, maybe a place like the Raiders. It obviously depends what they do, if they do go after a quarterback early in the draft or they decide to wait. Other than that, I think Seattle, I know we talked about them in part 1 a little bit, but I think he could fit well in that window of trying to have him sit behind Geno, get to know like how to run an NFL offense, take a lot of the learning curves that Geno had to do when he was rushed out and wasn't ready, and how to implement those. I think that would be a really good fit for him long term.
Yeah, I think the Seahawks would definitely take him at 18. I don't anticipate him being there. I don't know if the Raiders are going to take him. Maybe they do. I just think they're going to get a little scared off, and I think that they're a pretty logical Shador target. Just Shador in Vegas. I think everybody kind of sees that as like a possibility. I kind of see it too. They're the type of franchise that loves to gamble on these types of players. So I feel like Shador at 6 to the Raiders is something that's going to be widely like prognosticated. But I have two teams in mind for Jalen, and I think it's number 9, the Saints, and number 11, San Francisco. I have to say I'm terrified of him ending up a 49er. Like, absolutely terrified. I think Shanahan's already taken his shot with Lance, and it didn't work. But that doesn't mean that he was wrong in terms of what quarterback would be devastating in his scheme. And the same way I like Dirk to the Dolphins, I really like Milroe to the 49ers. And to me, that's just, I'm nervous. I'm already kind of shaking. I think that would be pretty rough for the rest of the league. And I think it also might be why the Purdy thing hasn't quite gotten done yet, because I think that they're looking at Milroe, and I think they're going to wait and see if he's there at 11 before they, give Purdy that contract. I think that they want to see a little bit more before that happens. So I do think they will be taking a quarterback. The other team I see for Milroe is the New Orleans Saints. The Saints had a lot of success running plays with Taysom Hill for a while. I think that they're very in tune with the value of a quarterback that can run running plays and how much of an advantage it gives you in certain down and distances. And if you have a guy that could also throw, it's kind of like Taysom Hill on steroids. So I'm looking at number 9 and at number 11, and I think that one of those teams are going to take him. Now, what may happen, as you're saying, it's funny you brought up the 3rd round, 2nd round. So when Malik Willis was being drafted, in that draft, people would ask me, all right, who do you think this team's taking? I'm like, I think it might be Malik Willis. And round 2 happened, and I'm like, round 1 goes through, and I'm like, I think it might be Malik Willis. And I was just wrong. I was just dead wrong for like 15 consecutive picks. It was not 15. I had him and Walker from Philadelphia, the D-tackle. I'm like, the next pick is Carter, sorry. I'm like, the next pick is Jalen Carter. It was always Jalen Carter was the next pick until it isn't. Like, people would ask me, who is it? And I'm like, it's Jalen Carter until the pick isn't Jalen Carter. And now I'm like doing the same thing with Milroe, where I feel like there's, like you said, there's some people who think he's day 2, day 3, way further down the draft. And I think I could be in a similar situation I was with Malik, where I'm like, are they going to take him now? Are they going to take him now? Who's going to grab him? So it's just funny that you would say that, because I had a similar experience with Malik in this way.
Yeah, no, and I think right now it's honestly just all over the place where these quarterbacks will actually go. I think Ward is a pretty safe bet to go at least in the top 5 somewhere. After that, I feel like it's all over the place. I mean, like we talked about in part 1, but Shedeur Sanders has been projected as anywhere from the 3rd overall, 2nd overall pick to like the end of the 1st round. I think I even saw like one mock, which not sure if they had much credibility, but I think he was like early 2nd. So even he's been all over the place. So I think everyone's just trying to get a gauge on NFL teams right now, what they think of these guys. And it's just too soon from the combine and all the interviews, and just see how the visits go before like really getting a real pulse where they go. And everyone could be completely wrong. Like 2022, like you said, with Malik Willis, where everyone had all these quarterbacks in the 1st round and it was only Kenny Pickett. And even that looked like a stretch based on how that went in Pittsburgh. So it's just hard to kind of predict right now.
It's really difficult to predict. I mean, we're going to get to your next guy. I want to do your sleeper, Kyle McCord, next. And I think he's another guy now that I'm looking at. I'm like, wow, he has a pretty wide variance on where he could go. I'll give you a second to pull up McCord's accuracy chart.
Yeah, give me one moment. Just got to get this.
Yeah, no problem.
There we go.
So bringing up Kyle McCord, I'm going to let you open up the conversation on McCord. He's your sleeper. He's your guy. Maybe he's not. I mean, I think he's a sleeper. I don't think anybody has him like ahead of. Maybe some people have him ahead of some of the top 4 guys, but I think like he's kind of definitely not the first name you're going to think of. It's usually Dart, Milroe, Shedeur, Cam. McCord's name kind of comes up later. So kind of want to, we'll put it to you. What do you like about Kyle McCord?
Yeah, no, and I think for me, like, so my favorite thing, and we talked about this a little bit in part one, I wanted to see guys succeed. So back, at least for me personally, when I saw Kyle McCord at Ohio State the previous season, and I was just like, this is not NFL quarterback. This guy is not confident. He does not have great ball placement. Like, he does not look like a quarterback that should be in NFL. And then he goes to Syracuse, and it's like a total 180. You can see on his accuracy chart here, his almost the whole full field is green. Even like deeper areas are looking really good, and he's doing that with great volume. So, and the bigger thing is like he went from being a not confident passer to being almost a too confident of a passer at Syracuse, where he's just taking like super gutsy throws, like throwing it in tight windows, taking some big chances, and a lot of times like he pays it off to his credit. Like some of the decisions I'm like, ugh, but I mean, when you get a completion, like, I mean, that speaks to your arm talent and your awareness of leverage to be able to fit it over guys, fit it into a tight window. And that's something that is important in the NFL when those windows get tighter and you need to squeeze it in. But I mean, he has just, I honestly, in my eval, I probably undersold his arm a little bit. He probably is, like, I gave him a B minus for his arm strength. He's probably more of a B, maybe a B plus. I think more around that B area where that's more of like a quality starting quarterback arm strength. And he has great release. Like, there's so many times when teams would try to blitz him and they just had no shot to get to him because he just would let the ball out immediately. So he's got the release, he's got the arm strength, his accuracy is there. The big thing for him is just that decision making. Like I said, he can be really gutsy, and especially like if you're just looking at box scores and you're just looking at like game to game, that Pittsburgh game is going to pop out immediately where he had so many turnovers and he just looked honestly awful. He can just get really just tied into like trying to fit it into a tight window, know where his like his read is, and just really lead the defense with his eyes. So that's the biggest thing. But I mean, if he is able to clear that up and just take that next step as a quarterback to not get himself into those traps, like we're talking about a quarterback with good tools, with good accuracy, that in the right system. I mean, I didn't think too much of Brock Purdy when he was coming out of school, but and I don't think I would comp him to him because I think it's a little bit of a generous comp to try to comp to Purdy with how he's been in the NFL. But there's a lot of Purdy in him with the gutsy passing, the accuracy, ability to scramble. Not great, but at least to be able to escape pressure. Like, there is a lot to work with if he just goes to the right team with the right plan.
So McCord is your sleeper. My sleeper is going to be next. And I wish I had picked yours. I love McCord's tape. I love it. I love the way he throws. I love his anticipation. He's playing the cornerbacks and the safeties. He's playing their leverages really well. He knows where he wants to put the football. He sees he sees the space that he wants to throw it. Sometimes he sees space that isn't there, and maybe it's a little bit because he wants to make the really hard throw, the throw that he's worked on. I could see it, especially on the outside. He's just really able to. He has good perception. He's still getting better, but he's got great perception on the outside receivers. He knows how to judge and gauge the safeties. And play kind of blackboard football. He does a great job playing blackboard football, and it shows in his footwork and his timing because his mind is like, okay, if that's there, the ball's gone. And the way that I would kind of compare him to, if I had to look at it, my comparison for him, I think there's some Joe Burrow there. I think some people might give a little bit of Joe Burrow because of the way he's decisively throwing it deep down the field into the outer quadrants, like to Higgins and those types of throws. But the guy I think he's really a lot more like is Kurt Warner. I see a lot of Kurt Warner in his game where sometimes he probably will take some pretty bad hits. He's probably a little more mobile than Kurt, but he'll take some bad hits, but he's also going to hit some back shoulder stuff, like underthrow the ball on purpose. He's going to have really good perception of the field. His perception is probably up there at the top of the class. I think a lot of people are going to love Jackson Dart and not realize that the quarterback they really think that they're really talking about is Kyle McCord. I think he perceives the field very well. I think he's practiced these throws in his own way. I could see it's independent practice, a little bit like I was talking about with Cam Ward. And sometimes it's because, and you could see it kind of in like how he's overexcited about threading the needle. I think in your analysis, you caught the same thing. But kind of like Cam, I see a lot of survival instinct on Kyle McCord. I see somebody who did it his own way, who's got answers independently to the questions that defense are going to be. And I also think that he projects pretty decently against some higher caliber defenses, the same way that Warner was like, pretty good in the playoffs and just able to lead good offenses. And I think for McCord, he's going to amplify a good receiver. He's going to get every ounce of it out. Maybe sometimes he'll over target, but he's going to get every ounce out of his top guys. Anybody who's got talent, I feel like he's going to be great with. He might have some trouble if he has to kind of make chicken out of chicken, like, a chicken shit out of chicken salad, whatever the term is, lemonade. What's the one with lemons into lemonade? Lemon juice. I'm getting all my things mixed up here, but like, to me, like, he's like, I think Shedeur would do better, like, in terms of making a lot of discretionary decisions, whereas McCord's going to do better with the higher upside guys because he's going to know how to use their size and their speed and their body control to create angles on the throw. I'm jealous of you. When you said McCord was your sleeper, I was like, oh, okay. I hadn't watched a lot of tape on McCord even up until like a few minutes ago. I went and I just watched a few like quick videos and I'm like, I saw it instantly. I was like regretting that I didn't do more work on him because he's very much my style of quarterback. He kind of plays a little bit the way that I played. So I have some, like, maybe some bias and resonate with him, but Kurt Warner's game also resonated with me in that way. Maybe he's a little bit more mobile. I don't see him as a super mobile guy, but I think that somebody's going to look at McCord and be like, this guy can make all the high level throws. And I could see him shooting up draft boards, shooting up there just by some of the throws that he's willing to make, can make. And I think he's determined to be able to make even more challenging throws. I loved his tape, like, instantly. It's funny. And I don't like Milroe. I really liked right away. Also, I saw with clarity. And McCord is the polar opposite quarterback of Milroe. And yet with McCord, I also saw it right away. I'm like, this guy fits in. And I was really impressed with McCord.
Yeah, no. And I think also what's going to go really well when he talks to NFL teams is talking about the adjustments he made going from Ohio State to Syracuse. And because that's a big transition to go from such a big program to a small program and really just like not only just not skip a beat, but just progress as a player, making that switch. And I think at least showing that he can make a transition and still elevate his game and not regress like a lot of other quarterbacks like they may have concerns about. I think too, at least with McCord, there's a lot of, you mentioned like with the quarterbacks, but I think also there's a lot of, and I think the NFL Stock Exchange guys talked about this, but there's a lot of like Baker Mayfield in him too, where he tries to play like Baker a lot with making those gutsy throws. And Baker is loved by his players. Like you said, like will feed his top targets. And I think there's a lot, like you said, that McCord can do as well. But he's also has some good awareness to be able to hit his check down and get those easy plays when they are present to be able, and is capable of reading defense when he works his way there. It's just, he's got to get those boneheaded plays out of the way. But again, that's what NFL coaching is for.
Yeah, I watched him for a few minutes. I kind of immediately grasped the type of player he was. He's definitely somebody who would benefit from, that check down game, just so that he doesn't force too many second read backside throws that he's going to make assumptions on. Either assumption number one that he could, that he can make the throw, but assumption number two is that the guy's even generally open. Like, I could see him making some pretty gutsy guesses out there that'll be like, did you really see where he was throwing? Like, did you really? And he's like, no, well, I just figured that because this guy was here and that guy was there, that this guy had like a 75% chance of being open. And sometimes he'll be right. But I also think that sometimes it's going to be like, we really would have preferred you just get that to the wide open running back in the flat. So I kind of see how like a good check down receiver obviously benefits every quarterback. But I think it would really benefit him just so that he feels like that guy could pick up 10, 20 yards on a short pass, as opposed to like, oh, I'm checking it down to dump off. We're going to get tackled, 2 yards, 3 yards short of the sticks. I do think actually what you're saying about the check down threat is actually very important for McCord, just so that he doesn't feel overly pressured to force these balls in.
Yeah, no. And I think that'll be the biggest thing that's a very easy to coach thing for a lot of players too, which at least with a lot of a lot of the players we've talked about, there's like, okay, can he read a defense? Can he make this adjustment? Can he escape pressure, like make good plays against pressure? But for McCord, if a check down is one of the things that can at least help that decision making, like that's a really easy scheme thing just to be able to fix. Like, obviously it's not going to be as simple as just like the next day that's going to be fixed and he's going to be leaning on that more. But when you can scheme to fix that area weakness a lot easier than a lot of those other clear deficits, like that also, again, makes it easier to justify taking him earlier than some of the other quarterbacks we've talked about.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'm comparing him to Cam Ward right now, because they have sort of a similar footprint to me in terms of their pocket presence and the way that they quickly make their decisions, whether it's Ward in the short passing game. And it partially is because I think the way Ward's built and the way he throws. McCord is definitely more of like the Kurt Warner style quarterback, deep to short, whereas Ward, they both kind of do like kind of similar types of mistakes where they both try to be the hero when for McCord, probably a check down and just living for the next play. Just generally live for the next play so you get another opportunity to throw that deep pass or that intermediate, outside throw. Whereas and same thing with Ward, where I'm just like, Ward, you don't need to make that throw. You can hit a beautiful laser 12 yards away. Like you don't need to do that. They kind of can get in their own head. It's different. It's similar and different, but I think that there's a lot of similarities between McCord and Cam Ward's film. And it kind of gets me excited for both of them, but especially because McCord is not like widely considered like that top 3, top 4. Like I think you can make the case that McCord is actually better than like a better choice than some of these other guys, just because once again, like tape says it right away. I would say the 3 guys where I said the tape right away hit me was Cam Ward, McCord, and Milroe. Shedeur, it was like very divisive. Dart, I was like, okay, I see it, but I don't see it 100% in terms of him interacting on the field in the way that I want to see it. But with McCord and Cam, I see it right away. Milroe is different because it's the rushing threat, so it's a little bit of a different point of view. I consider McCord and Ward similar but different in terms of, I think if you talk to them about football, they would be very, very similar in the way they talk about the game, just different in the way they play the game just because of, they're just different people.
Yeah, no, and I think also to the point of similarities between McCord and Ward, I think something that also is a very big similarity that it separates them from other quarterbacks in this class is their deep ball accuracy. I know at least from my charting, I mentioned with Ward, he didn't have quite as good deep ball accuracy in the charting, but honestly, I think that was more of a sample issue because if you go game, like his deep ball accuracy is there. And McCord was the top deep ball accuracy quarterback for my charting across the entire class. And I think even just like standard PFF stats also back that up. Like there's just when you look at like quarterbacks like Dart, like his deep ball accuracy will just really start to fade. And I think he's going to have a lot of trouble just like really getting it in there in tighter windows in the NFL. And we even saw in the Senior Bowl where he underthrew on his deep completion. But when you have someone that can just make those long completions, but also be so accurate underneath and intermediate, like that just gives you such a leg up if you can just fix up the finer tuning of the other issues.
Yeah, I think I'm going to move McCord slightly ahead of Dart in my rankings. I think I'm comfortable doing that. As much as I like Dart, I like McCord more. I like McCord more, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think I have him slightly ahead of Dart. I have him ahead of Dart for sure. I think I just think he has what it takes. I think he's going to be a good quarterback, and because of that, once again, like I'm going to grade him the way I grade him. I think a good quarterback is a good quarterback, and where do I think he can go? I mean, where do you think? What are some of your draft spots for him? What round do you have him in, and what spot do you have him in? Like, what team do you think he fits with?
Yeah, for McCord, I feel like he's more likely going to be a day 3 pick. I think at least with him not getting an invite to the Senior Bowl and I think he was invited to the Shrine Bowl instead. That usually aligns with like ending up being a day 3 selection. And I think I think like a place like maybe something where they have like a kind of like you said, like a quarterback that's on the way out. So I think a place like the Rams is appealing to me. Something where he's got a good offensive system around him, can build some good tendencies and get to play behind Stafford for a few years. And then maybe he is the guy in a few years. Otherwise, worst case scenario, you probably have a really good backup to be able to just add a little bit of support if you do have to target a guy in a couple of years that you think is the guy of the future.
So interesting. I have a different NFC West team in mind. I like him going to the Cardinals. I think he would fit very well with Harrison Jr. and Michael. What's his name? Michael Wilson. I think him and Michael Wilson would be very good together. He's kind of also that deep threat receiver, kind of like that. I think him and McBride would be a very good combination too. I'm not going to say they take him at 16. Maybe they trade up to get him. But like once again, kind of I'm independent here. I do like McCord. Like I like him more than Dart. I think that Shedeur, I could see Shedeur falling just because I think there's a lot of negatives with him. I think that people don't like that are just not present in terms of overall potential. I think like there's people who are going to think lowly of Shedeur, but to me, I have McCord cleanly in that top 4. I have him ahead of Dart. I have Dart kind of the next tier down. I have him in that top 4, which means I think he could get picked in the first round. And I think the Cardinals at 16, they could take him. I don't usually have guys after the fact that I kind of think about as first round quarterbacks, but I just think if somebody can be a good quarterback and you see it, and I do clearly see it, then I think he's worth a shot. And I think his accuracy chart, like you have, like it speaks to it. I think he's just improved pretty rapidly. And I think that can sometimes throw off some evals because you got to sometimes you take all 3 years into account and then you can't really take all 3 years. I just think he perceives the game at a really great level. I think he simplifies the game well for himself in terms of how he wants to handle the deeper part of the field, going deep to short. A little different than some of the quarterbacks in this class where you had Dart playing in the Kiffin offense. You have Ward, who's really more short and then to deep. I just like his consistency in the short game. I think that's kind of his quote unquote superpower. And then you have, a few, you have Shedeur, who's kind of more of a down by down decision maker. I just view McCord as the true deep to short quarterback in this draft. There's not he's got that clear Kurt Warner signature to him. And I hope that some team doesn't beat him out of it. I think some team might beat that out of him, which I think is going to be really bad. I'm nervous about him going to the wrong place because some team is going to be like, no, we just want you throwing 7-yard slants. Like if he goes to the Giants, I'd be like, oh Lord, like how many short? Maybe him and Neighbors would be great together. I can tell you that right now. Him and Malik Neighbors, that would be perfect. But I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Him and Neighbors, him and Hyatt. Also, Hyatt's speed, I think, gives a lot of the perception mismatches that would do well with McCord. I'm still high on Hyatt, by the way. Other people are not. But McCord, I mean, will the Giants take him at 3? Seems a bit rich for my blood at 3, just because I think that other teams won't take him. So, you have to understand, the market for players. I don't think McCord's market is first round, even though he, in my opinion, he deserves a first round grade. I don't know if the perception in the market is like that. I had this issue with my podcast with about Charvarius Ward. I'm like, I think he's worth X per year. And he's like, well, it doesn't look like he's going to get those offers. I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean that my evaluation of what he'll do is wrong. It's just that just because I think X of him doesn't mean I'm going to pay him, more than the market by $4 million. Doesn't mean I'm going to do that. So I think that McCord's market may allow a team to trade up and get him. I think that could be a part of it. The same way that Lamar's market kind of fell and then the Ravens traded up into the first round to get him. I could see a team trading up for McCord. I could see that happening. And I also think that Pittsburgh could be into McCord. And I think that, I don't know if people have linked Pittsburgh to him, but I actually think that Pittsburgh is a really good spot for him. So I'm curious how he would play, how that could happen. So McCord to Steelers would be like my juicy call, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I think the Steelers would be a good fit too, because at least then you kind of have a system where it eases the quarterback in a little bit with the play action, the run game. And I think also just to circle back to your point, you mentioned about changing their perception of the quarterback. I think that's such an important thing with quarterbacks nowadays with all the transfer portal stuff is Bo Nix, I think, is a perfect example from last year where if you watched him at Auburn like I did, I thought he was terrible. He was really bad at Auburn. And then he goes to Oregon, totally different player, looks so much better. And now he's in the NFL and playing great. So things can change very quickly. And I think we do need to be flexible with evaluation of the quarterbacks because situations, as much as we try to say it doesn't matter, it does. And those habits that they build in good systems can transfer over to the NFL. And with the way McCord has made those improvements, I can see a lot of these things translating to an NFL offense and a productive offense.
Yeah, no, I can definitely, I definitely see it that way. I like guys that show this kind of independence. I think I'm pretty clear, with Ward and with McCord, I see a lot of the independence that I like in the quarterback position in terms of an individual problem solver. I think he's got a bunch of that in him. And you know, sometimes it's the changing places, guys who have the guts to change place and kind of bet on themselves to get a bigger role. I mean, in the NIL world, it's interesting because guys could stay an extra year, like Drew Aller, for example, staying an extra year. I would have had him top 3 right away. I love Drew Aller's game. I would have had him really high up, but apparently maybe other people didn't. I don't know. But I think also part of it is that with the NIL deals, they can make a lot of money anyway and stay in college. And I think that that's also an appealing part of it. So sometimes switching roles or getting more like getting into the right place or, you know, that type of stuff can really matter in the modern college game. Like you're saying with the transfer portal and with NIL, it changes the way that these guys think a little bit. And I just kind of want to grade these guys the way I see them. And I immediately see how McCord translates to the pro game. And, you know, Joe Burrow, Kurt Warner, but I see a lot of Kurt Warner in terms of the way he really visualizes the game. I like, he's always been one of my favorite style quarterbacks in terms of how I modeled my game was after the way Warner played, also not being that fast. So that also helped and hurt. So you had to find another solution. So I kind of like that with McCord. So I have him like the Steelers would be juicy. I think the Cardinals at 16. I don't know if they'll take him at 16, but I think the Cardinals are a really, really solid fit for him. And, you know, Miami definitely comes to mind as well. But I think that the Cardinals and the Steelers have like the right fit with Pickens and with Harrison. All of them have good tight ends. That could be a good safety blanket for him, you know, good size guys. So I think that's pretty much where we see it. So heading into the last quarterback, which is my sleeper pick, is Dillon Gabriel from Oregon. I'll give you a second to pull up the chart.
Yep. Yeah. Let me get that up real quick. There we go.
Oh, I don't see it yet.
Oh, yeah. Why is it not going? There we go. Okay. Sorry. Just have to click one more thing.
There we go. Dillon Gabriel. So Dillon Gabriel is one of my favorite guys I watched. I love the way he plays on a down by down basis. I just feel like he's somebody who can execute 36 plays in a row, get it done in that way. I think he's super duper scrappy. I feel like he makes a lot of good, quick little feet movements in the pocket, keeps plays alive in a really entertaining way. I find him to be a total pain in the neck. Like guarding him in the Oregon offense just felt like teams were a little helpless in certain situations where I feel like Oregon's skill guys were very quick and they meshed well with Gabriel's throwing style. And he's a lefty. I think that throws teams off. I think it'll always throw teams off a little bit. I think that some of the problems people have with his motion is because they don't quite understand them. Not that they don't understand. They don't realize how the reason why he's motioning like that with that big windup is because he's trying to create higher angles to release the ball. So with shorter quarterbacks, I've seen they release the ball earlier in their release. They go further back and release it earlier because it allows them to create that vertical angle. Whereas a 6'5" guy just has to go like this to create a decent angle, just very easy. A shorter player will release the ball earlier in terms of like in front of his head or behind his head and further back behind his head. It'll just be like a little bit of a different type of throwing just to create that height. It kind of creates the illusion of height because now the angle is different. So a lot of the shorter quarterbacks will do that. And him being a lefty is always fun, but I just like the way he moves around the pocket. I felt like he was a very high morality quarterback. I feel like he distributed the ball well. He ran the plays really, really effectively. And I think you could trust it. There was a certain trust element that I felt like Oregon just put the offense in his hands most of the time, and they were very happy with the results. I think that there's something about him. He has, everybody says this guy's got moxie. I think Gabriel has a lot of moxie.
Yeah, no, and I think at least the big thing with Gabriel too is like, so with the charting that I have up on the screen now, so for full context, this is essentially mostly based off of right-handed quarterbacks because I only have charting data from this draft class and the last draft class. So there's going to be some areas where like, because we almost have to think of it kind of flipped a little bit. So some of the areas on like the right side of the field is bad because it's a lefty thrown to the right side. So that's where at least like if you look at his stats, he's a very accurate passer and he is more accurate than like some of the areas on this show just when you have to flip the field like that. But yeah, no, I think there's, like you said, like, I mean, he was was the most productive college quarterback from a statistical standpoint, like ever, for a reason. Like you said, like he knows how to win, he knows how to get plays done, he knows how to finish play drives in the end zone. Like he knows how to play the quarterback position, which I think is just so necessary. I think with a lot of these quarterbacks, where we talk about like processing issues, adjusting protection, a lot of the little things that like he just clearly knows how to do. And from what I saw from the Senior Bowl, it seems like coaches and scouts were impressed with his knowledge of the game and how to be able to run schemes and concepts. So I think a lot of that is going to speak volumes to how NFL teams view him. And I think the big thing for him is just, like you said, the lefty thing, the height thing, and then also just the possible arm strength limitations, just seeing of exactly what you can get out of him, even though, because he might be able to know what he needs to do, but can he physically get those throws to those areas?
Yeah, I think the knocks on Gabriel are going to be similar to what you just said. I also think that there's a part of it is that he's not physically imposing. So he doesn't create, like Milroe creates natural advantage right on the field. Cam Ward, natural advantage. This is a little bit more like Shedeur, where you have to understand what you're looking for and then value it and value that specific thing. I think that Shedeur and Gabriel are a little bit interesting. Shedeur's obviously got the regular height. He's got a nicer throwing motion. He's not the awkward lefty. He's easier to work with. He's also clearly been to he just looks like an AAU quarterback, Shedeur Sanders. I don't know how to explain it. He almost looks like he came off of like the carbon copy conveyor belt, but it's for white quarterbacks. And that's what's so blows my mind about Shedeur is that it looks like they kind of beat up a lot of his individual habits and turned him into this they chiseled him out of iron. It's kind of cool. And I kind of appreciate it because Shedeur really has a great throwing motion. He's really clean. And it's just funny to watch, a quarterback who everybody would think he's Deion's kid. He's going to be this live performer, this improviser, this speedy athlete. And then to see him be just such a fundamental quarterback is just it's a little bit jarring. I have to say, I know I'm talking about Shedeur a lot, but it's really strange to watch because of the way Deion is, and his kid is totally different in terms of the way he does things. It's so funny. But kind of like Gabriel in a way, in that you have to kind of appreciate the execution. You have to appreciate the consistency. And I just, when you run a certain type of offense, you're going to get pigeonholed there. And they're going to say, okay, this guy can't really run any other offense. And they're probably right. He probably should be running the Oregon offense. It's kind of the right way to build around him. I don't know if I would put him in the same scheme. I would put a Jackson Dart or a Milroe. He's going to run his specific thing, and he's kind of limited to that. And I look at him and I see just he's got a little Doug Flutie in him. Does that make sense? He's got a little bit of that magic to him, where it just, you don't really know exactly always how he keeps figuring it out. He just keeps having the answer. It's weird. It's you don't expect this kid to always have the answer to the questions, but he always seems to have it. And there's got to be something behind that. And I think that his mobility is also a piece of it. I think that he's good at managing his mobility in relation to his receivers, and it gives them extra time to get open. And then when they get open, he's able to hit them in stride. I just found a lot of things I like about him. Now, Gabriel is probably the only quarterback here. Well, I have Dart also. I don't have Gabriel as a first-round grade. Gabriel, as a Ravens fan, I would love for the Ravens to draft him as our backup quarterback. So I have him as a really fun, feisty backup quarterback. And that's weird because most people, when they put out quarterbacks, I think he's going to be the starter for 10 years. And I'm I don't know if he'll be the starter for 10 years, but I think you could have, on the right team, 2 or 3 really, really fun years with Dillon Gabriel. And I think off the bench, he's going to really surprise some people and give you a really high quality backup. So he kind of fits into a different mold, whereas kind of like Doug Flutie. He doesn't probably have the physical skills that Flutie has, but I think as a passer, he's more advanced. For Flutie, there was kind of nobody thought he could be the starting quarterback for 10 years, but on the right team, with the team that committed to him and had a plan for him, he could be really, really fun to watch. And Gabriel, to me, it just was fun to watch. I thought that their offenses they just worked so well that I could see a team being okay, we're not taking him in the first round. It's just too big of a risk because of all the other measurables that go against him. And I think those are fair. I'm not here to go and say, take him number 10. I'm not going, it's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you get this guy on your team, he's going to help you. You're going to have a week where your quarterback goes down. He's going to come in the game. He's going to win the game for you. He's going to win it outright. And it's going to be like, oh, this guy can play. Now, maybe he can parlay that into some sort of long-term starter role, but that's not where I see it. I kind of see he's going to have this sort of peak somewhere where it's the right team in the right place is going to get their hands on him, and he's going to be exceptionally entertaining.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think I see him more as a backup as well. I think just with the physical limitations, it does probably just cap him as a high-end backup. But I think the big thing that is needed to be a good backup, and really probably the most important trait in general for a backup quarterback, is the processing and awareness, which, I mean, he's shown throughout his entire college career just how well he can read the field, how well he can run an offense. Like you mentioned earlier about like being able to be in the right scheme or be able to produce outside of schemes. And like he produced at UCF. He then transferred to Oklahoma, produced there, transferred to Oregon, had a great year there as well. So like everywhere he's gone, like he's been productive. And to be able to do that at like, I know a lot of them aren't very like complex in terms of NFL style schemes, but like just to be able to jump from scheme to scheme and pick them up so quickly and run them so effectively is a testament to his knowledge. And I think that's going to speak to a lot of NFL offensives, just knowing like, okay, if the starter goes down, like we have a guy that can come in, make the right reads, like you said, keep the ball moving and just keep the offense on track.
I think that this is also a fun part about, complicated versus simple. I kind of like simple. Like I've grown, and maybe it's because Lamar's my quarterback, but Lamar's kind of complicated, really. But I think I kind of always appreciated teams, not just that could run the ball, but that could just understood that simple advantages and just kind of putting their finger down on the patient. Just like, you're bad here. We know it. We're just going here until you overcommit and move it. I just think that you are trying to find advantage in any way possible. And I think Gabriel is good at understanding how his team could get advantage. And it's using his players. It's not necessarily using himself, but he knows how to use the weapons around him and their strengths and weaknesses. And he's creative in terms of the way he moves in the pocket. I liked kind of the way he was moving around to change the angle for him to throw sometimes. So I think that, I don't mind that a scheme is simple. I think that that's actually taking more precedence in the modern NFL, where they suddenly realize that there's only one Peyton Manning. There's really only one Brady. And that really one of the more easier ways to build a consistent offense is with your Lamars, your Jalen Hurtses, your Milrows. Obviously Milrows not an NFL player, but I'm just making a point. Like the guys who just right away, that's the advantage we have. And we're just going to just put our finger on the patient. It's just going to be painful. We're just going to keep making that painful for you. And I think that we're starting to see kind of a shift back. I think a healthy shift back. I just think that we had this time where like everybody was expecting to be just this down the field thrower like Josh Rosen, and we were expecting 20 Josh Rosens. Like he kind of fit that model, the Matt Leinerts, and now we've started to kind of shift back to a healthier place where you have your downfield guys, you have your moving guys, you have your big strong guys, your little quick guys. I feel like we're in a pretty healthy place in terms of the quarterback position. You have your timing guys too, like Tua, people who think they can just build off of that. Like you do have more diversity in the offense in terms of what teams are looking at the quarterback position. So I just think that Gabriel's going to be a really pesky backup somewhere, and he's going to win some games as starter. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he walked into like a playoff game, like when Jay Cutler got hurt and their quarterback, I forgot who it was. Their quarterback came in and almost won the game. They had a late turnover or something that costed them. I think it was an NFC Championship game where that quarterback came in. Like it wouldn't surprise me like he has this just phenomenal cameo appearance somewhere in his career.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think at least for him, like you talked a little bit about like scheme, and I think Gabriel is someone and that's the big thing with quarterbacks in schemes is like, can they play outside of that? Because that is ultimately the thing too that like separates like a backup that's just like thriving based off the offense and one that could like win a football game is who can operate outside of a scheme. And maybe I wouldn't say he's a backup just depending on certain people's view on him, but like that's like my concern with someone like Jackson Dart, who plays in a pretty simplified scheme, was when things break down, he looks really lost. Whereas Bo Nix, for example, when things broke down, like he looked more controlled. He knew where his checkdowns were. He was pushing the ball downfield. And I see a lot of that in Gabriel, at least for his former tape. This year, I think he got a little off track and moved the needle to maybe a little bit too conservative with the way of how he was a little bit too willing to just take the check down and not push the ball a little bit downfield on when the play did break down. So, but he's done that in the past at Oklahoma and at UCF. So I think he can do that again. I think it was just probably Oregon just wanted to be a little bit safer with the ball with him. But I think at least if he can, he's a player that can play in structure, play out of structure, which again, just gives you a lot of opportunity as if he ever does have to come in.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I look at the teams that he would appeal to, and it's usually teams with a good starting quarterback. Like I love him as a backup in Baltimore. Although some people would say he doesn't fit the option, I'm like, I get it, but I think he's got a live arm, and I think that they have enough receivers there that it would be interesting. Um, like that's the teams that kind of it appeals to. I'm curious, like which team do you think he appeals to? Because to me, it's like Baltimore. I'm trying to look at the list here because I can only see the top 18 are above the fold. So I'm trying to see who the bottom teams are. But like I could see him being like a backup in Minnesota. I think he would also look pretty good there. So maybe like Baltimore, Minnesota. We'll keep him in we'll put him in purple.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins would be a good fit for him. You already got like Tua, who's a lefty. You already got a smaller size quarterback, so you already have that kind of already in the offense accounted for. I think the other good team would be like the Cardinals. One, you also have a smaller quarterback, but I think also like he obviously isn't a scrambler that Kyler Murray is, but at least you still have kind of the considerations you have to take, and also just he can kind of provide like a Kyler Murray light experience where like he's not going to be able to complete as many throws downfield. He's not going to be able to outrun players, but he can kind of do like a lot of things at a lower degree to still be doing a lot of the similar concepts, maybe just not as much of the explosive plays.
I'm just imagining him fighting out Cooper Rush and Trey Lance for the backup quarterback job in Dallas, and I'm just cracking up. The island of misfit toys.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think that kind of wraps up our summaries of these 6 quarterbacks. I really appreciate Backseat Scout giving me all the time in the world. I think we've gone for about 2 hours here. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity hopefully down the road to do this again. Maybe next year. Maybe we'll do the quarterbacks next year. But really thank you so much for your time. Everybody should check out his channel on YouTube. Really great breakdowns for the draft class this year. I think he's done receivers, he's done quarterbacks, running backs. I'm sure there's plenty more to come. So definitely give him a like and a follow on YouTube. I think he also has a Substack, right?
Yep, got Substack as well, at least for anyone that prefers written articles.
Yeah, so you can definitely find him there as well. So Backseat Scout, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really great having you. And hopefully we'll see you next time.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, looking forward to more quarterback discussions.
For sure. Down the road, I'm sure we'll have some text threads on it where we'll be wrong and right depending on what year we choose.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in for part 2 of the episode, and have a great night.